It's lurking everywhere. And now we're at a point, yeah, and then not long after that, they started tearing down, Confederate Civil War monuments and stuff that's been there for like 100 years, which was always weird because 100 years ago, people could walk by a Robert E. Lee monument and not care. It wasn't a big deal to them, black or white. Now, all of a sudden, it's a bigger deal to us than it was to people whose like parents fought. They had grandparents who fought in the Civil War or died in the Civil War. They were okay with it. And yet for us, the wounds of the Civil War are fresher or more raw for us than they were for people a century ago? It makes no sense. How are we less able to be objective and non-emotional about the Civil War than people who had family members? I mean, ex-slaves were still living back then.
Well, I think it's because it's just like a religious ideology. Like when the Taliban started blowing up those ancient statues of Buddhas. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Because they destroyed things that were a part of human history that we would have studied for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And they destroyed them because they didn't go along with their religious ideology. And I think part of the woke thing is this religious ideology that has to be followed. And you cannot stray from the lines. You have to stay inside whatever this ideology is promoting and telling you what to do. And one of the things was that you had to take down all these statues of terrible people. And I remember Trump saying at the time, well, the problem with that is like eventually they're going to take down George Washington. And everybody thought he was crazy. Like that's a crazy thing to say. But once they got past Civil War people, then they got to who owned slaves. And then they got to they wanted to take down statues of Thomas Jefferson, and eventually did get to George Washington.
Yeah. And it was always going to go that way because George Washington, the founding fathers owned slaves. Not only that, but they were rebels, rebelling against a governmental authority. And if they had lost, then they all would have been hanged as traitors, and that's how they'd be remembered. Thankfully, they didn't. But so it's not that far of a leap to go from one to the other. And of course, the issue is that everybody who lived on Earth certainly prior to 100 years ago, is racist by our standards today.